We are back with another episode of Making the Brand, and this one's going to be a little bit different because I am on the hot seat today. So this is my new co-host, Chad Swieca, and this is the first go at a different format.
And make sure that you like and subscribe this and follow us so we can go from 20 followers to 21. Big time. Oh, man. Okay, so Joel, just to copy off you last week, just want to make sure your name's right. It's Joel Mathew or Matthews?
Mathew.
Matthew.
I always say one T, no S.
Wait, it's only one T? Are you serious?
One T, yeah.
Oh, I gotta. That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
So let's kind of go back to you a little bit, just get a grasp of who you were. But before even we go into like early work career, I think that a lot of our formation starts when we're younger.
Yes.
So when you were a kid, high school, college age, and things like that, when did you kind of realize that you were a little bit, I say weird, other people say leader, but when did you realize that you kind of were actually made more so to be a leader?
I think this is a really good question because as I look at my own kids who are 8, 5, and 2, it's like you see these skills already developing and these attributes already developing. I remember being in high school and, I played sports and did all that, but my hobby was building computers. I was into technology. And so for me, it was building computers and tech and coding and hardware and all of that. But really, I think it started at 14 when I got my first job. I'm grinding coffee in my cousin's warehouse. And that's kind of where I think the work ethic developed, but it was really observed from my parents who came here from India in the 70s and worked multiple jobs. And, my dad worked in a factory, like very blue collar. My mom worked 2 nursing jobs to, build us a life here. And so I think that, I don't know if it was leadership then, but it was work ethic. And for me, I also observed my older cousins. And so those guys were entrepreneurs and trailblazers, and they were legends for me. And so they're part of the inspiration for me wanting to be an entrepreneur. I remember even from age 10 or 11 knowing I wanted to be an entrepreneur or start something. I just didn't know what it was going to be or what problem I was going to solve until much later into my career.
Well, that's cool. I mean, even we talked about it last time about mentorship, how we both kind of seek that, and I don't even think we probably realized at a young age of kids, it's like you have your older cousins you look up to, and you probably don't even realize it's like you're doing that same thing to your kids. You got Jesse that's just looking up to you and is probably just like, I just want to be dad when I'm older.
It's either that or they want to be the opposite. So
that's fair. That's very fair.
Because it was we did this dinner and we just like reflected on a few things, and it's like one word for each person, and the first thing my daughter said was works a lot. And then so I just took that as hardworking or work ethic. My Sharon, my wife, was probably like, you're not home much, but it was, I was okay with that.
Fair enough. I mean, it's building something for them, right? And I think that, kids don't realize it in the time, but then when they get older, they're like, oh, like I got all these things because my dad bust his butt. Yeah, for sure. And I think the perspective is not that you're not there, it's that you're out doing something for them and to build a life for them. I was really encouraged in talking to 2 of those older cousins that I looked up to as entrepreneurs, talking to their college-aged kids, and just like, how was childhood for you? Was it like you felt like your dad was not there or just always working? And they both had a very similar answer, and they both are not close or friends or anything, and they both said when he was there, it was just quality time. Like for one cousin's kid, it was soccer. Like my cousin was always at every soccer game, coach, did all of that. For another one, it was basketball. She went to every travel basketball game with her dad, and so they poured in where they could. And so I was pretty encouraged after that of just like, it's not a quantity of time thing, it's a quality of time thing. Let's go a little bit further now, going to college and post-college. Describe just a little bit, not too much, of college Joel, and if you want to share like blunders you went through and things, but before you even started Fortress or anything like that, because it's really what started to shape you in that time frame.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of blunders, probably not safe for this format, but
PG. This is a PG show. PG.
So when you talk about a kid in high school or middle school who was building computers, it wasn't necessarily like the most popular kid in school. So, so I was like more shy and quiet and reserved in high school. And when I went to college, I decided I was going to reinvent myself. And, I was dating a girl at the time, had a different group of friends. And that was the first experience that I had outside of this little like white Christian bubble.
Were you in a frat?
I was. Yeah. So, so that was where I was going to become a different Joel, Mathew, and more outgoing, more of like the party lifestyle and more fun and social. And I did that. And, I think as far as like leadership kind of woven into it, my second year in college, I ran for president of one of the largest student organizations on campus and won. And then I joined a fraternity the year after, and that was a whole different experience. But, even in that second year, started a promotions company and just to help spread the word on different events and things like that. So there was just a lot of learnings in these like small scenarios of like testing something and marketing something and branding something. And one thing I think even from before I went to college that set for success now is just connecting people and always just being able to connect. And I feel like even you and I, it's like, oh, talk to my coach Jeff, he's has a soccer background, or talk to X, Y, or Z, they can help you with your launch. And I think being able to connect people even in college was always helpful, just to get things done, but also giving without asking for anything in return or expecting anything in return. Just give and connect good people, put them in the room, put them in in a room together, and good things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm similar in that I always want to connect people one way or another and things, and it's doing it because you want to, not because it's just like, let me connect you with them and then give me 10% of that deal. But no, that's encouraging, and it's been extremely helpful.
And my thought on that is like, just put good people together and like God will bless you tenfold, like without 100%. Asking for anything. But you probably could have monetized more situations, but
it all what comes around goes around.
Yeah, exactly.
So okay, I'm gonna steal one of your words here. So post college, you had a job doing selling sponsorships for CBS.
Yeah.
Right. So obviously you did that for 5 years.
I did that for 2 years. I was in TV advertising for 5 years prior to that.
Okay.
Similar industry.
So at what point in all that, when did you have your brand storm and realize that you wanted to create Fortress?
That's a good question. I always talk about this light bulb moment, and it's part of our pitch when we're presenting Fortress. And I was working for CBS. I met with, I always say, 5 clients in a row, and they were all just like, Joel, I'd love to advertise with you, but my website is terrible. I can't spend a bunch of money and have people see this horrible website. So for me, that was my light bulb moment. I was like, I know how to code. I could probably hack something together to help this person on that front too. But that's really when my light bulb moment was, my research started of like, there's got to be an agency that is technical, like a web developer, app developer, but also creative, like an ad agency, because that was like both parts of my brain. I had more of a technical background and upbringing and focus, but then I was also in advertising and marketing. And so like, I wanted to find or start an agency that combined both.
Okay. So walk through, I guess, that actual inception and genesis story of when you decided to go ahead and say, hey, I'm quitting my job. You just got married or had a fiance?
I was engaged.
You were engaged. You tell your fiance, hey, by the way, I'm not going to bring in any money anymore, and I'm going to start a company. Like, give me the rundown of all of it.
All of it. Yeah, it was a crazy time, but I think in God's plan and timing, it was like that was the time for me to do it, because it does get exponentially harder as you have a mortgage and you have kids and you have bills and all this stuff. And when I started Fortress when I was 28 and engaged, but I remember studying from my cousins of like, there's 2 ways to do it. Like, you can either build something on the side and let it grow, and then once it tips heavier than your day job, quit your day job. And for me, I'm like, I just didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have 2 different focuses. I'm like, I'm going to go all in and like just no safety net. And so quit my job at CBS, and I remember just like taking my stuff out in a little bin, and I went and I sat in Millennium Park on a bench, and it was fall, and like I felt like the wind blowing and the leaves like swirling around me, and I felt free. Like I just felt free, because it wasn't a great culture. And so that ultimately, I think, was part of my story of like how not to do culture. And that's why I'm so focused here on like, we've got to have a certain culture,
Yeah.
even more than strategy, even more than anything is like the culture has to be,
Yeah.
it has to be sound here.
So then what was your first sale?
Well, to answer your question, your last question, I remember one moment I had told everybody that I was starting a company and leaving my, cushy advertising job, except for my fiance's parents, and they were the only people I was nervous to tell. Like my parents know I'm a little crazy and will do different things, but that's not what they signed up for. They signed up for I had this professional job and wore a suit and tie and worked downtown in a high rise and all that stuff. And I remember taking them to the Keg Steakhouse in Toronto and took them to a fancy dinner. And
When you just quit your job?
when I just quit my job, yeah. See, I do things a little backwards, but I had this like card I printed out at Office Max, and it had the wrong phone number. I had a typo in the phone number, so I like wrote it out, put the right phone number, slid it across the table for them, and it said Joel Mathew, President, Fortress Consulting, and it had this horrible logo that I designed myself. And I remember they just looked at it, and I didn't say anything, and just waiting for them to click, and just immediately, like from day one, they were just so supportive, and probably even more than my parents. My parents, for 3 years after that, were just telling me to get a job. Yeah, they were just supportive from day one. So it was
That's awesome.
it was a really good support.
That's good. Yeah, that's not true for everybody
Yeah,
getting
yeah,
the support, especially when you go from having something that's a cushy job, you know what
yeah,
it is, and all
yeah,
of a sudden it's like, hey, see you guys.
yeah.
I'm just-
And it goes back to answering your last question on first accounts or clients. A lot of people that start agencies, they take a big account or they take a big client from their existing agency or media as a foundation. I didn't have any of that. I didn't take a single client from CBS or Comcast or wherever, and it was all just started literally from scratch, from zero.
How did you find, like, what did you do to source your first client?
That's why Al's Beef is actually right over your left shoulder on there. That was our first client, and it was just random. You can call it random, but I don't believe that it's random or coincidence. But I went in there, Italian restaurant ended up being owned by Indian people, and you wouldn't think that Al's Beef would be owned by Indian people, and just struck up a conversation with them, and long story short, that ended up being our first client. And so from there, just kind of rolled it into the next one, and the next one, and the next one.
Very nice. So,
Yeah. But it was a lot of Starbucks meetings. Like there was no office for 3 years. There were no employees for 3 years. It was a lot of day and night. During the day, meeting people here, pitching, selling, connecting with anybody I could talk to. And then at night, talking to some of our overseas guys, managing like our SEO campaigns and things like that. But literally anybody and everybody. I remember our first email blast that I sent out was just to literally everybody that I knew. And it was just, here's Fortress Consulting, here's 6 bullet points on what we do. We do web development, social marketing, digital media. And that turned into the first wave of clients.
wow.
Yeah, it was all my fraternity brothers and family friends and things like that. So,
Hey,
yeah.
sometimes the crazy things that you do in your past
Yeah.
come around to help in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah. I remember one of my fraternity brothers, he got into mortgages. Another one got into real estate. Another one became a lawyer. So those were like our first set of clients.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Side question, kind of, how'd you come up with the name Fortress?
Excuse me. That was one. It's a great question, and it was one of those things where I know people have this like where you feel like a word or theme or phrase is following you, and it was just I would look on the newspaper and it would say something about Fortress, and then the radio, and then TV, and then I would hear it in a song, or it's just I felt like this word was following me, and I wanted something that portrayed strength, and just with 90% of businesses failing in the first 5 years, and then 90% of them failing from year 6 to 10, wanted something that stood the test of time and was strong. And this word fortress ultimately was from a Bible verse, Psalm 62:6, where it says, "God is my rock, my fortress, I will never be shaken." I just thought, like, what a better word to build a small business on is like something that's rock solid and won't be shaken.
So in year 15, it's changing to Cornerstone?
Yeah.
That's the name of it?
No, there is no. I actually am thinking about changing a part of it, but not that word, no.
That's funny. Okay, so I, at least for me, and I'm sure for you, especially at the start, and I'm sure even now, there's a lot of moments where I can remember one moment when I was in my office and I just was broken down, and I'm just like, God, I cannot, like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Like, I can't do it on my own. I need help. I'm not gonna say, do you have that story? I know you have that.
Yeah,
Everybody
for
has
sure.
that story.
Yeah.
I guess give me one of those because everyone's got multiple.
Yeah.
Give me one of those at the start that you were just like, God, I need your help and I need something to come
Yeah.
through here and give me that, blessing story
Yeah.
that came through.
I mean, it's countless. I think I was telling somebody the story just yesterday of like growing up in church. There would always be pastors, and they would give these sermons of like, "Oh, I needed this, and I needed to make ends meet," and then this envelope full of money showed up in the mailbox, and I was just like, "That is absolutely crazy."
Mm.
And then I started a company, and that became almost like a daily thing of like some prayer answered or some door opened or some bill paid to make payroll or make rent or make ends meet. And so there's the one specific ones, but it's a daily thing. I think even now of like, hey, we've got this big nut to cover, and how are we going to connect the dots? And sometimes it doesn't add up, and sometimes you have to there's got to be things that happen externally that make the dots connect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was telling Heather, but also one of my favorite things is like when Jesus feeds the 5,000.
Yeah.
But I actually don't take it from the perspective of, oh, look at what Jesus did with all of these fishes and loaves. I actually take it from the boy's perspective that gave it to him, because the disciples didn't just go over and just say, give us your lunch, kid.
Right.
The kid went to him and was like, hey, you're going to do better with this than I am. And so I think, I asked other business owners that are Christians, I'm like, hey, what's your fishes and loaves story? Like, when did you just like give it away and just say, hey, it's not yours anymore?
I think, and it touches on your earlier question of like that moment where you're like, I don't know how this happened. I had several of those meetings where it's just like, I don't even know how I'm in this room or even why I'm in this room. But I feel like I was placed there for a reason or a purpose. I remember, just even one of the first deals that we got in year 3 was like a $75,000 web project. And that was more than I made in the first year. And that was more than I made in the second year of Fortress. And just seeing that first deposit come through of like $8,000. And it was just like,
that's money.
I'm back. Yeah, it's like real funny. And it was just surreal to see that. And I was just like, man, just even seeing the word Fortress Consulting Group on a check or on somebody like wrote this and paid for what I created.
There's always something that happens and you're just like, is this real? Like, is this actually happening? The pinch me moment.
And in the year three is actually very interesting because I have a friend, Sharon, my wife's friend from Toronto, who had an agency, and he just talked about this like hockey stick growth that happens in year 3. And for whatever reason, like year 1, you're just, shooting your shot, trying to see what works. Year 2, you're refining, and then something clicks in year 3. And that's really what happened for us. And, year 1, I think we generated like 40 grand, and I paid myself $4,000 because kept in the business. I've always been wired of just keep as much in the business as possible. Year 2, we did $55,000, I think, and I was feeling myself, and I doubled my salary to $8,000 that next year. And so obviously in year 3, getting a check that was like, or winning a deal that was $75,000 was a big deal. And I remember a conversation going into year 3, Sharon was just like, if this is something you're gonna do, like, decide this year if this is something you're gonna stick with, or if you're gonna go back and get a job. And it was like, there's no turning back. And then our business grew 100+% from there.
And I mean, a lot of that is just being faithful, right?
Trying to,
which is I was gonna say, it ain't easy.
No, it's not.
Especially, I'm sure, when did you guys have your first kid?
In 2016. I started Fortress at the end of 2010.
Okay, so you were
Yeah.
You weren't struggling with, like, it wasn't year 3 and it was like, hey.
No, I wouldn't add a kid into that mix. No.
Yeah, that's why I won't have a wife into this mix. But
I will say, I mean, there's lots of people that do it, and that's their motivation, and that actually helps them find another gear. And I remember when Jesse was born, it helped me find another gear, because I'm like, I don't have time to waste anymore. There's no like hacking it together or figuring it out. Like, I've got a kid at home waiting, to spend time with and that I need to be there for and that needs me. So, everybody has different timing for their motivation.
Yeah. When do you think that you guys actually found your niche? Because you picked out that 6 bullet points at the start.
Yeah.
But it's like you always say something year one, but that ain't the case. So at what point do you think that Fortress became, really specialized as you guys are known as this, and this is what we do?
Honestly, it's been an evolution. I don't know if there's ever that moment of like we do X, Y, and Z actually until this year.
Really?
Yeah, because the first year I was just a freelance, like outsourced marketing, like CMO, fractional CMO for several businesses that they were like 7 figures in revenue, but obviously can't afford a full-time marketing person or a marketing department. So I would give them 10 hours a month or 20 hours a month or 40 hours a month. And so the first year it was marketing consulting. Then the next year we got better at SEO. The next year we got better at web dev. The next year we got better, we built websites and built apps. And then, more recently media buying and production and, all of that. But this year I had a moment where, seeing our first billboard go up, where it just had 3 words. It said branding, it said branding, websites, marketing. And for me, I always struggled with like my elevator pitch because I'm like, we're a digital agency, a digital media firm, digital marketing agency, a marketing firm, marketing and advertising, web development. There's so many different ways to spin it. And there's agencies that are just a web developer or just a marketer or just a branding creative. So this year was the first year that I felt like succinctly I can say like these are the 3 lanes that we do. So I mean, it took me 13 years to get there, but it was just branding, websites, marketing.
So I got 9 more years.
Yeah. I mean, you're a smart guy. You'll probably figure it out faster than I did.
Okay, fair enough. I'll pray for 9 more years. All right, so a little shift. Let's talk about your people and your brand. I mean, I believe that your people are your brand, right? And I mean, I think that you have an amazing culture that you've created. How have you gone ahead and found talent, especially at the start? Have you found that talent and been like, hey, this is who we are, and this is where I'm trying to go? How were you able to get people in?
It's a great question. It's like integral to how we started. Like I said, for the first 3 years, it was just me. There was no employee, there was no intern, it was just me. As an aside, on the private equity side, a company that we're currently looking at, their management said like people, product, and process, like that's what they're focused on, and in that order. So like first things first is people. And so when you're starting out, you don't have a ton of money for salary and payroll and all this stuff. So I found this way of giving back to people as far as internships and experience, but also getting them to buy in to the culture and the vision and also to give their time. And so at first it was just like, hey, come do a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day internship, get college credit, get a letter of recommendation. I'll try to connect you with somebody that's useful for you. And then it ended up being our pipeline of like Aubin was our first intern. It was like 8 years ago. He started as an intern. He just moved here from Michigan, wanted to get his foot in the door in graphic design, started as an intern, then went to part-time, just because at the end of that internship, if they're really good, like I don't want them to go. I don't want to lose them. But I still might not have a seat for them and might not be able to afford them. Yeah. So for him, it was part-time, and then, he was hustling, and I saw the way he was wired too, of just like always trying to hustle and just keep learning. And so he was working part-time at a restaurant and delivering food and all that stuff. And it was a very proud day for me when I'm like, quit your job, like come on full time. And I would say Tiffany, same story of just started off as an intern and just saw like the skill set of she can write, she can do video, she can do all these things. And so she was the first one that she went back to school, and I didn't want to lose her. And I was just like, hey, work part-time while you're at school, and then we'll have a job waiting for you. And it bought me time to get all the ducks in a row on my end. But there was a time when every single full-time employee started off as an intern. And now we're hiring more senior and more people with experience. But I mean, still, if you look at half of our team, they've started in some level of intern.
Yeah, I think that's a huge testament to you also. Yeah. I mean, just the fact that people are willing to wait for you because they believe in your vision and your leadership, and that's super commendable.
Yeah, and I never saw it that way. I was just try to build a great company and do great work, and I didn't think of it as me, and that's part of our culture too. It's like number one is we, not me. It's not about me as the owner. I'm usually more behind the scenes and behind the camera, and versus in front. That's why I put pants on for this. So, but yeah, so I think people just bought into the culture of like, hey, we're all missionally aligned, and it's not about me. And I had an intern once tell me like, it's weird that you talk to the interns the same way as you talk to everybody. I'm like, why would I not do that?
Why would you not go ahead and
right?
Yeah, that creates the culture from the top down.
Yeah,
and I mean, even like as Christians and whatnot, replicating and watching Jesus's life, it's like, okay, Jesus didn't go walking around just being like, hey, I'm just gonna talk to you guys, and you can go ahead and share it to everybody else, but like I'm just gonna talk to you. Like that wasn't the case,
right?
And I think I mean, you do a great job of emulating that as a leader, and keeping Christ at the forefront. So switching to the Christian side of it, how do you keep from just seeing dollar symbols?
I don't remember what year it was, but a big turning point for me was realizing that you don't have to be in ministry or pastor or preacher to have an impact on others and to have a certain walk. What was a turning point for me was realizing that this is my mission field. Business is my mission field. And a stat that I heard is the average CEO will have influence over 10,000 people in their career, and like that's a lot of people that you interact with. And so to be able to try to walk the walk and not just talk the talk, and do business a certain way, and definitely it's a struggle. Like it's not perfect. It made a ton of mistakes, and still try to avoid them as much as possible. But still, I mean, it's not easy. Not everything is always black and white, and have failed a ton, but just trying to strive towards the right path.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you feel that, I mean, like us example, right? Like we both connected and we knew we were both Christians and whatnot. We were able to connect over that. Do you feel like when we're in business sometimes that when you meet somebody else and you start talking and you realize you're like, they're a little bit different. Like, how quickly do I just ask them straight up, like, hey, are you a Christian? And then do you like figuring out how to work together? I feel like it's a no-brainer almost at times.
Yeah, but I will say the flip side of that, there's a bad side of that too, where it's like you almost give a free pass and you're setting yourself up to be burned. And I know we both have some stories there as far as like, oh, but this is a Christian agency or partnership or business person, and it can still go sideways. Like we're all fallen people at the end of the day, and but I try to be more realistic with it now. But there is an instant connection for sure when you know that you're missionally aligned or like morally same, in the same boat as somebody. And I think for when you talk about culture, I feel like people know we do things differently. It's not just about the dollar. It's like, how do we sleep at night, and the dollars will come.
Well, let's give a quick plug. I want you to talk about the Christian business group that
fellowship. Yeah, and so that is a group I discovered in I think it was like year 3 or 4 of the company. I had 3 employees. We had our first office, and it was really, a similar boat I think you've been in, of raising your hand and saying like, hey, are there any groups that I can plug into and just learn from? And I remember texting one of he's actually our pastor now, and he was like, hey, are there any like Christian businesses or business people that I can hire? And he was like, oh, get plugged in with this Christian Business Fellowship group. And it was great. I remember just lighting my world on fire with just these guys have the same story as me or struggle or whatever, and trying to do business differently. And, they want to build a kingdom and build their businesses too. And so, and then there's nothing wrong with that. But their whole thing is building your business is going to give you greater influence and greater resource to have more of an impact. And so I thought that was really special, and I'm still a part of it 10 plus years later.
It's great hearing the Fortress story, and there's definitely more to it. But what small little piece, what's next for Fortress?
What's next for Fortress, I think, is to continue to grow. I mean, we've grown at, it's funny because I heard this thing of like Marcus Lemonis like grew his companies like double digits for the last 3 years or something. Obviously, much larger scale. And I was like, I've grown double digits for the past 13 straight years. And so, it's something I'm proud of as far as growing. But I think what's next for Fortress is focusing on bottom line over top line, knowing our numbers, and really just honing in on the numbers, and growing. And for me personally, it's building an autonomous team where it's like I don't need to be a part of every decision. They can grow, and I trust them, and they'll make right decisions, they'll make wrong decisions, and they'll learn and grow from that. Where I don't need to be involved in everything. And so I think the past year and a half has been really a testament of that, of stepping back to help with the private equity venture and really handing the keys to the team here, and letting them run with it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you've got a great team. I mean, I'll plug them, Heather and Joy.
Yeah.
They're doing a great job running day to day of it all. And yeah, thanks, man, for sharing the story and allowing me to co-host this. And I'm going to start plugging random funny things in here. But yeah, sweet, man.
That's awesome. Thanks.